What happens when one man becomes indispensable to a queen he cannot marry and carries a past he cannot fully escape? Robert Dudley, 1st Earl of Leicester, walked a dangerous line between devotion and ambition. Born into a powerful yet ill-fated family, he rose from disgrace to become the most favoured man in Elizabeth I's court. Their bond was forged in childhood, deepened during shared imprisonment, and cemented by years of courtly service. To outsiders, he was the Queen's shadow, always nearby, always trusted. Yet scandal clung to him like smoke. His wife's mysterious death, his secret marriage to Elizabeth's cousin, and his political missteps abroad. Still, Elizabeth could not let him go. He danced, hunted, and plotted beside her, a companion and confidant like no other. For 30 years, Dudley stood at the edge of greatness, never king, but closer than any other man to the throne. His life is a portrait of Tudor power, brilliant, fragile, and forever marked by what could never be. Robert Dudley was born in 1532 or 1533, the fifth son of Jane Guildford and John Dudley, later Duke of Northumberland. His father was a powerful and ambitious statesman under both Henry VIII and Edward VI, rising to lead the Privy Council and shape the course of the English Reformation. With 12 siblings, Robert grew up in a household where education, ambition, and loyalty to the Tudor dynasty were instilled in daily life. From a young age, Robert was immersed in courtly and intellectual culture. He was tutored by Roger Ascham, the same man who taught Princess Elizabeth. Robert was particularly drawn to mathematics, engineering, and navigation. These interests remained with him throughout his life. His early years at court were shaped by the political climb of his father, who became one of the most powerful men in England during Edward VI's reign. In 1550, Robert married Amy Robsart, a gentlewoman of good family. The match, believed to be a love match, was arranged during Robert's travels with his father in Norfolk. The two were young, Robert around 18 and Amy about 17 years old. Their wedding was even attended by King Edward VI, a sign of the Dudley family's prominence. But that prominence, however, would soon unravel. When the teenage King Edward fell ill in 1553, England faced a succession crisis. The Protestant Edward was determined to keep the Catholic Mary Tudor from taking the throne. Under pressure from John Dudley, the dying king altered the succession in favour of Lady Jane Grey, a Protestant and granddaughter of Henry VIII's sister. Jane had just married Robert's younger brother, Guildford Dudley. The plan was clear. The Dudleys would place Jane on the throne and secure their family's hold on power. When Edward died in July 1553, Jane was proclaimed queen. Robert was dispatched to intercept Mary Tudor and bring her to court, but he was too late. Mary had fled and was rallying support. Despite his efforts, Robert was outnumbered, and Mary soon gained overwhelming support from nobles and commoners alike. Within days, the Privy Council abandoned Jane and declared Mary as queen. The fallout was immediate. Robert and his father and his brothers were imprisoned in the Tower of London. His father, the Duke of Northumberland, was executed in August. Jane and Guildford followed the next year. Robert remained in the Tower for over a year, accused of treason, but spared execution. His survival may have been due to his relative youth, his limited role in the plot, or simply Mary's desire to avoid further bloodshed early in her reign. During this time, Elizabeth, Mary's Protestant half-sister and future queen, was also briefly imprisoned in the Tower, accused of being complicit in Wyatt's rebellion. Although no evidence directly linked Robert and Elizabeth during their imprisonment, the fact that they were both held within the same fortress planted the seed for future legends. Eventually, Robert was released, though not restored. His family's lands were confiscated. His reputation, like his fortune, was in ruins. He had gone from the son of England's most powerful man to a disgraced noble and under house arrest. Yet in the years to come, he would rebuild, becoming not only a courtier once more, but the man closest to the heart of a queen. When Mary I died on 17th November 1558, the crown passed to her half-sister, Elizabeth. The political landscape shifted overnight, and among the first to respond to the new reign was Robert Dudley. Once imprisoned as a traitor, he now found himself back at court, summoned to Hatfield House to join the Queen. Elizabeth wasted no time in appointing Dudley as her master of the horse, a role of great privilege and proximity. But it wasn't just about stables and horses. This position gave Dudley daily access to the monarch. He helped organise royal processions, accompanied her on hunts and journeys, and even controlled the personal stables and transport. Most of all, he was by her side, constantly. It was no secret at court that Elizabeth favoured Dudley above all others. He stood tall, with sharp features and effortless charm. Their bond was playful, intense, and exclusive. He could make her laugh, and she let him speak when others dared not. Ambassadors whispered of their closeness. Courtiers noticed the glances, the touches, the long hours spent alone. Some called it affection, others saw ambition. But one fact complicated everything. Robert Dudley was already married. His wife, Amy Robsart, lived far from court. Their marriage, made in 1550, had begun as a love match, but now a decade later, their lives had diverged. Dudley remained at court, a fixture beside the Queen. Amy stayed in the countryside, primarily out of sight. Though he sent her money and gifts, his visits were infrequent. Rumours swirled, with some saying she was ill, while others whispered of neglect. Elizabeth meanwhile remained unmarried. Her council urged her to wed preferably a foreign prince, someone who could provide an heir and strengthen alliances. But she resisted. When pressed on the matter, she insisted she would marry only when it suited her and not before. Many believed she had already made her choice, but that choice they feared came with scandal. In the early years of her reign, Elizabeth leaned heavily on Dudley. He stood beside her in public ceremonies and whispered advice in private chambers. He became in all but title her closest companion. The line between loyalty and love began to blur. Whispers turned into concern. Some nobles feared Dudley's influence, especially with his wife still alive. The court watched and waited for what might come next. And then, in 1560, something did. Robert Dudley's life in the 1560s and 1570s was marked by power, prestige, and ever-growing tension between his public duties and private desires. Following the suspicious death of his wife Amy Robsart in 1560, Dudley remained at court, where Queen Elizabeth I's favour kept him constantly in the public eye. As master of the horse, he was responsible for the Queen's transport and stables, giving him daily personal access to Elizabeth. Their closeness caused gossip throughout Europe. Many courtiers believed Dudley aspired to marry the Queen. Foreign ambassadors reported that Elizabeth was deeply attached to him and hinted at a potential union. Yet despite their emotional bond, she never named him as her chosen consort. Dudley's ambitions were not limited to the Queen's heart. In 1562, when Elizabeth fell seriously ill with smallpox, she named him protector of the realm in the event of her death. The role would have given him vast power and a significant annual income. The decision shocked members of her council, particularly William Cecil, who viewed Dudley as reckless and overly ambitious. The Queen recovered, but the episode exposed how far her trust in Dudley extended. That same year, Dudley was appointed to the Privy Council. He began playing a more direct role in shaping policy, particularly in areas of religion and foreign affairs. A committed Protestant, he supported religious reformers and encouraged Elizabeth to take a firmer stance against the influence of Catholicism. In 1563, Elizabeth offered Dudley as a suitor to Mary, Queen of Scots. This odd proposal may have been a political manoeuvre to remove Dudley from the court while keeping him close to the succession. Mary was unimpressed. She viewed Dudley's status as too low, despite Elizabeth naming him Earl of Leicester in 1564 to elevate his rank. In public, Dudley thrived. He became a generous patron of the arts and education. He funded plays, supported scholars, and served as Chancellor of the University of Oxford. He transformed Kenilworth Castle into a palace fit for a queen, complete with lavish gardens, great halls, and a grand tower bearing his name. Privately, though, he struggled. His political rivalry with William Cecil deepened. While Cecil worked tirelessly behind the scenes, Dudley was flashier, drawing attention and criticism. Some accused him of blocking the Queen's marriage prospects for his gain. Tension peaked in 1575 when Dudley hosted Elizabeth at Kenilworth for a 19-day visit. He spared no expense. Masques, feasts, music and fireworks all lit up the estate. Many believed it was his last, desperate attempt to win her hand, but the Queen left unwed. By the end of the 1570s, Dudley's position remained strong, but he was no longer the singular figure he had once been. Others, including his stepson, Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex, would rise. Yet Robert Dudley remained the Queen's most enduring favourite, a man whose personal and political lives were always inextricably linked. As Robert Dudley's star rose at court, so too did the gossip that followed him. While his bond with Elizabeth remained unbroken, the world around them did not stay still. The Queen's marriage remained one of the great uncertainties of her reign. Foreign ambassadors, council members, and even her subjects speculated endlessly about whom she might wed. Dudley remained the obvious favourite, and yet, despite the growing closeness between them, she would not name him her husband. Elizabeth's reluctance was not due to a lack of affection. If anything, their relationship grew more intimate in the wake of Amy Robsart's mysterious death in 1560. But the scandal cast a shadow. To marry Robert would have damaged Elizabeth's already fragile image, perhaps fatally. The death of Amy Robsart was ruled an accident, but suspicion never left Dudley. Many believed he had arranged his wife's death to free himself for the Queen. Yet Elizabeth did not banish him. Instead, she kept him close. She elevated him to the Privy Council, leaned on his advice and showered him with honours. He was gifted lands, titles and influence. Their bond was powerful, affectionate, political and deeply personal. But Elizabeth would not tolerate rivals for his attention. When rumours of an affair between Robert Dudley and Lettice Knowles, Elizabeth's cousin, began to swirl, it stoked the Queen's jealousy. Lettice, recently widowed, bore a strong resemblance to Elizabeth. Their similar appearance and shared ancestry only heightened the sting. Robert married Lettice in secret in 1578. When the Queen found out, her reaction was immediate and furious. Lettice was permanently banished from court, referred to by Elizabeth as the she-wolf. Dudley, however, weathered the storm. Though their relationship cooled for a time, Elizabeth could not give up on him completely, and over time he regained her trust, if not the full warmth of their earlier closeness. His marriage to Lettice produced one son, Robert Dudley the younger, but tragically the child died in infancy, leaving Dudley heartbroken. He remained devoted to Lettice and also forged a strong bond with her children from her previous marriage, including Robert Devereux, the future Earl of Essex. It was a time when the line between personal life and political manoeuvring was dangerously thin. Robert's marriage was not just a personal betrayal, it was a political misstep. It marked a turning point in his relationship with Elizabeth, and while he remained indispensable at court, the Queen's affections began to shift. Others, including his stepson, would soon step into the space he had once held alone. But through it all, Dudley maintained his role as trusted advisor. Their love may have faltered, but the partnership endured, and now shaped more by loyalty and shared history than by the intensity of their younger passions. The cost of their forbidden love was scandal, suspicion, and sacrifice, and yet their connection survived it all, though changed forever. In the final years of his life, Robert Dudley's loyalty to Queen Elizabeth was put to the test on the battlefield and in politics. By 1585, England was no longer able to avoid open conflict with Catholic Spain. The Dutch provinces had rebelled against Spanish rule, and Elizabeth, pressured by her Protestant advisers, agreed to support their cause. Robert Dudley was chosen to lead the English expedition to the Netherlands, a role that would prove both an honour and a burden. On the 4th of November 1585, Dudley left for the Netherlands with 7,000 men, sailing from Gravesend to Flushing. Although his instructions were to offer military aid and avoid any suggestion of English rule over the Dutch, Dudley misjudged the situation. In January 1586, he accepted the title of Governor-General from the Dutch States General, believing he was acting in the Queen's best interest. Elizabeth, however, was furious. She had wanted to avoid provoking Spain outright, and Dudley's acceptance of the title appeared to do just that. Publicly, she rebuked him. Privately, she continued to support him, but the damage was done. His campaign was plagued with problems. Supplies were scarce, funding was inconsistent, Dutch factions undermined his authority. Despite a few successful manoeuvres, including the capture of the town of Doesburg and the defence of Grave, the overall campaign struggled. Elizabeth's hesitation to fully back the operation from home, combined with Dudley's own impulsive decisions, weakened English efforts. Spain regained much of its control in the region, and Dudley's reputation suffered as a result. By December 1587, he returned to England, weakened in both health and influence. Dudley still had one final act of service to perform. In 1588, the Spanish Armada sailed towards England. Elizabeth needed trusted commanders, and she turned once more to Dudley. He was appointed Lieutenant and Captain General of the Queen's armies and companies. His task to organise the defence of London and the south-eastern coast. From Tilbury, where thousands of soldiers were camped, Dudley wrote to Elizabeth, assuring her of their readiness. He filled the letter with affectionate symbols, including 2 small circles that represented the nickname she had given him, Eyes. He then arranged one of the most iconic moments of the Elizabethan age. On the 9th of August 1588, Elizabeth arrived at Tilbury, dressed in white and silver, and delivered a rousing speech to the troops. Dudley rode behind her, proud and solemn, knowing that whatever came next, this moment would be remembered. But Dudley would not live to see the long-term effects of the Armada's defeat. Just weeks later, on the 4th of September 1588, he died at Cornbury Park in Oxfordshire, likely from malaria or stomach cancer. He had intended to travel to Buxton to take the healing waters, but death came swiftly. Elizabeth was devastated. She locked herself in her rooms for days, refusing to speak. Dudley's last letter, signed as always with his nickname, was found in a small box among her treasured possessions. She labelled it simply, his last letter. Dudley was buried at the Beecham Chapel of the Collegiate Church of St Mary in Warwick. Years later, his wife Lettice would be laid beside him. His life had been marked by scandal, ambition, service, and a devotion that lasted until his final breath. More than a courtier, more than a favourite, Robert Dudley was the man who held the Queen's heart in a world where love was rarely free and loyalty even less so. If you've enjoyed this story and want to learn more about some of the most famous Tudors, then please consider subscribing. And remember, whatever else history may say, Robert Dudley was the favourite and perhaps the love of England's Virgin Queen.